I couldn't find a notebook stencil that I needed. So I made my own. Let me show you how. Hey, what's up? I'm Fids. I coach men's state league basketball, and I use my notebook here a lot to draw diagrams for plays, instructions, and drills. And I kept running into this reoccurring issue time and time again, where I was having to draw a full diagram of a basketball court to do one little explanation of a drill. And it was taking too long. So I did what any person with a 3D printer does. I went looking for a file, and I found nothing. Zilch cuts. So I decided to make my own stencil. My CAD drawing skills aren't amazing, but I still worked out a way to make it happen. Now this process can be used for really simple notebook stencils, or it can also be used for much more complex and custom designs. Let's get started. With this process, there's a few things you need to know. In order for the 3D printer to ultimately know what you want to make, it needs to have a CAD specific format to work with. So this is like an STL format or a 3MF. We aren't designing our stencil in a CAD system, so we have to do a little bit of converting along the way to get to that endpoint. The two file formats you need to understand are raster images. These are pixel-based images like JPEG files or PNG files. And you also have vector images. These are SVG files. Now, pixel-based images are great for giving you transparency, but vector images give you that crisp, sharp line that CAD-based systems need. So we have to work within these parameters. To start making our image, I'm actually going to be using Photoshop. It's just purely because I'm way more comfortable with it. However, you could even use Paint. We're in Photoshop here, and the first thing that I did was I created a new file just to the sizing of what I'm looking to create. So my little stencils here are 10 centimeters wide by 6 centimeters high. When you start making your shapes of your stencil, just remember that ultimately the white lines are where your pen is going to work through. Now, I used the ruler to help get my sizing right, just so that I wasn't making too big of a space or too small of a space. It is going to require a little of trial and error anyways. In the upper left stencil, I made a circle. It's so that I could make a ring loop, so I could create this little loop here to connect up my stencils. If you want to use that loop, check out the description below. I've left the file in there for you. In more complex shapes, you need to use something I call pillars, and they're basically black lines that are areas to stop the solid cutout of the white. And what that does is it just enables it to have that borderline that I can use when I'm doing my stencils. If I didn't do that, the 3-point line would literally cut out everything in the middle and it would stamp it straight out. In your design, it doesn't need to have everything super rigid, but I learned from some of my mistakes that it ended up separating and created a problem for my print. I wanted it to be much more rigid, so I used pillar lines to help that happen. Once your design is finished, you need to go ahead and export it to PNG. Now, if you can export it straight to SVG, you can skip the next step and go straight to the timestamp right here. Next, you want to open this free Adobe site. I've left the link in the description as well. This is great for converting a bunch of different file formats. And one of them, when you scroll down, it allows you to convert an image to SVG for free. Simply drag and drop your PNG and then download your SVG file. For the final stage in the converting process, open up TinkerCad, and then you're going to go to import, and then I'm going to drop in my SVG file that I've just created. Once you do that, you just need to rework your dimensions for the width. I know that this is 10 centimeters, which is 100 millimeters. We go import. Now that we've imported the file, we just need to tweak our size. So all I'm doing here is I've just changed the thickness to 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter is perfect for slim and flexible stencils, but 2 millimeters does create a much more sturdy and rigid template. However, if you've got very, very small details like that, it can be too small depending on the thickness of your shapes for your pen. So you're gonna have to play around with this. Now that we have our sizing perfect, go ahead and export it into STL. Now, the stencils came out perfect. I have a bunch of different shapes as well as template formats for what I need. They're the right size exactly for what I'm looking for. These are great just to chuck into my pencil case and then I can take it with me. For the basketball ones, there was definitely a lot more trial and error. I guess it is a much more complex design. This one here was the first one that I did, and overall it looks okay, but the actual lines were way too thin to get the pen in, and also I wasn't happy with how flexible and much movement that was happening with this. I realized that I needed to put more pillars in these top corners. I amended the file and then tried 2mm, but 2mm was way too thick. Like, this is actually way more rigid, which is good, but it was still too high now to get the pen in, even with thicker lines. This right here is the final outcome, and dude, it's perfect. Like, let me show you. This here is an image that I made using the stencil literally for the Maker World page and printables and all that sort of stuff. And I use the template to be able to draw it, and I'm really happy with it. I definitely think you could use this to make a bunch of custom stencils specifically for you. If you wanted to use it for like paint stencils for art projects or literally anything, you could do whatever you want. Now that you know how to make your own custom stencils, tell me, what are you going to be making? Jump in the comments and let me know. Now that's going to do it for today's video. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. And until I see you next time, make sure you're looking after yourself, take care, and be safe. All right, peace.
Not